you're not going to get thrusted upon, shafted by the thrust. My friends, what's going on? It's BenCappp. We've got Kashtira, and most importantly, we've got counters to the counters of the counters and the counters for Kashtira. We've got all the side deck formulas going on, ways that people fought against those side deck cards in these past YCS tournaments, and just a really good insight on what the future might look like for Kashtira. So, getting into it, this whole top half portion here, this is basically the rundown average of decks that I saw for Kashtira's. So that's kind of what you're looking at for an overall deck. Now again, the video is going to be focused on stopping Kashtira, but I also wanted to provide the insight of how not to get stopped. Everybody wins, right? So I'm going to start into the side deck first. These are just cards that are relevant, but not, weren't the first ones that I thought of. So, Thrust. We all know Thrust by now. Search your deck for any spell or trap card. So, this card was definitely going to be talked about no matter what the format looked like. And right now, it's being played, especially within mind of stopping Kashtira because of the Shangri-Era always activating its effect in the standby phase. People are adapting to not activating this in the standby phase. It's hard not to when it's sitting there and it's free advantage potentially. So it would be, even my personal opinion, it would be very hard for me not to want to activate this. But if I know when I'm playing against game 2 or 3, I probably will have to stop myself. On top of that, the Arise Heart, its effect to attach cards, that's going to get it eaten up by Thrust, and that's kind of the whole play on everything is I activate Thrust, Arise Heart is going to activate to attach, all these things can just kind of play into themselves. So Thrust is extremely good for grabbing cards like Dark Hole, right, Regeki, Lightning Storm, just for obvious clearance, but a lot of people opting to use the Triple Tactics talent. If you're in the mirror match, you can, or even if you're not in the mirror match, you can take a Kashtira monster. And if you're playing an Arise Heart in your extra deck, you can slap the Arise Heart on top of it because the Shangri-Era activated its effect in the standby phase. So just keep in mind with the Tactics talent or the enemy controller, if you do take a Kashtira monster and this card activated on your turn from your opponent, you're still able to make the card as well. So kind of a huge play. Just make sure you have a monster zone. I know that came up actually in the YCS. You have to have a monster zone open in order to steal the monster. So yeah. Book of Eclipse, we all know it. It's been talked about. It's still good. People were actually switching to the Book of Moon. They're kind of declaring that a problem card is the card they decide, not the entire board, and they don't want the potential draws if something goes south. But blanketing the whole field face down is still always going to be good. However, it can be hit by Ash because you are potentially drawing cards. So Ash can stop the Book of Eclipse, which is relevant. It came up. It's part of the reason Ash is seeing a little bit more play again, because the Kashtira is so popular. Book of Eclipse is so popular. Ash, of course, is going to kind of find its way back in here. On top of this, it stops Branded Fusion, Branded finding its way back into top placements, finding its way into relevant, meta again. Ash kind of has been seen again just because of that alone, so it's a good card to have around you right now. As I said, the Book of Moon, some of the top deck profiles were playing Lance with their Book of Moons, just getting rid of the problem cards, preventing themselves from getting hit by problem cards. Lance being one of those cards that has kind of found its way back in here, especially from the top players. It just does what you need it to do right now. It's protection against your opponent's side cards. The Arise Heart protected. It was mentioned that the battle damage during the damage step is a big part too. It can really switch the game's pace up very quickly and kind of out of nowhere as a quick play spell. It's just very versatile. Always was a good card. and protecting your Arise Heart might just be the best thing you could do besides trying to block all your opponent's zones. So that's Lance, and again, Lance is going to be probably seeing more success against all these other cards as well. Enemy controller, I did mention it already. You can take a monster, slap an Arise Heart on in the mirror match. Enemy controller is going to be very good for summoning, say, Fenrir or Unicorn, activating the effect, bouncing it away from the field in case something comes up. Your field is now open again, depending on what happens when you take your opponent's monster. If you want to take it and, utilize its effect or crash it or whatever you need to do. But most importantly, this is going to be a great card as well against the Ibli. So you go from not being able to play to taking your opponent's best monster and playing. So enemy controller is just extremely versatile. It's good to get into the board against the mirror match and start making things happen. It was a very decisive card in the last few tournaments. So on top of that, we've got Dark Hole here. Stops the Ibli. You might want to side it in case that's a problem for you. It does its job. It just destroys everything. There's not much more to say about that. But of course, alongside this for Geki, Lightning Storm, same idea. It's just Dark Hole is kind of good for cash because it clears your side of the board too. Droplets, still a card. It's just good. It's just good for going second. If you go first and you have it, it's not the worst thing in the world either. But you're not seeing as many Dark Ruler No Mores at this point because of the fact that it did not stop the zone locks. But I have said the zone locks are kind of going to phase out to some degree. Obviously, we saw it have some good success lately, but it still doesn't stop that issue. So droplets and Dark Ruler aren't super relevant right now. Next, we've got Impermanence. Impermanence, still extremely strong. That is also in tandem with the Thrust. You can't Thrust after getting Impermed. It's not a monster card. So this card is still extremely good. It does its job. But just like Ash, it might feel lackluster at times, and other times it might feel great. So it just depends on kind of what your opponent has, how many different combinations of cards they have that can keep pushing through negations. Really decides if this card feels good or not. Next, we've got Evenly Matched. Evenly Matched was seen a lot in the last few tournaments. It is very good at getting rid of back row at the same time as getting rid of the monsters, because when you think about Book of Moon, Book of Eclipse, Dark Hole, that's why you're going to see more Lightning Storms too, is because the back row for Kashtira was a problem. People weren't equipped to deal with the monsters and getting rid of cards like Birth. You need to get rid of this card. This card's just as good as Birth, if not better in some ways. So Evenly Matched really helped with eliminating as much as possible. If you're a Kashtira player and this is an issue for you, if you Ibli, it's possible you're stopping them from using Evenly Matched, depending on if they're playing the outs to Ibli or not. But Ibli is a way for them, you force your opponent to control a card. If you've got everything lined up in defense, they cannot get rid of their Ibli or something. They're stuck, and they're not going to be able to evenly match you. Alternatively, there's the Solemn Judgment. Always does its job. But, Evenly Matched, you're going to be keeping your Rise Heart, obviously, and see how it plays out. Again, the Ibli is a good option, but a lot of people are preparing for that with Lingaribo, and even Donner helps get rid of it. You gotta have a way to get rid of Ibli. Whether you want to play the Dark Hole, the enemy controller, just ways to facilitate using it or getting rid of it completely. It's a problem. Next, we got Nibiru. This card, you probably are gonna want to play this if you're not already. But the people who had success with Kashtira, realistically, were trying to avoid getting hit by this in the first place. The tokens become huge, so you're actually able to out your own Nibli if you need to by crashing into the token. It's not like an issue where you use Nibiru as cash and then you just can't play. It can be, but you have to keep in mind, how to run the deck, how to facilitate running the deck. You don't want to get stuck. So Nibiru is great for that. That prevent my opponent from locking all my zones. I can jump in at any time. It's even good if you've got it in your hand and you've got your board set up, but you've got preparations and birth. You're able to bounce right back from that Nibiru play, even wiping your own board. Especially if you've prosperity'd, you know, getting all the other stuff in the graveyard from that was underneath the Arise Heart and triggering those effects. It's just it's a very good card on first or second turn. Same with Lava Golem. Lava Golem is going to do the same job in a way, but you are going to have to go through getting the extra deck hit, getting zones locked. You have to have, you know, of the available resources to still make a play after you Lava Golem or Nibiru. But these cards were very impactful, still are. If you are a Kashtira player, again, a lot of people that were having success were only summoning Arise Heart and not much else after that. It was kind of a protect Arise Heart, continue gaining advantage through my back row cards like the Birth and the Preparations, as well as Big Bang Shot, whatever it may be. So if you're not set up to get Lava Golem, you're not going to get Lava Golemed. But, you know, the deck gets a lot of advantage from extending, and that's why Lava Golem's still going to be seen, still going to be used, and I would suspect to look out for it. Again, Ibli, if you Ibli them, they're not going to be able to special summon the Lava Golem. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, because Ibli is so good at what it does. If it gets to do it, it protects you at the same time as it protecting you because your opponent can't really play. It's also preventing them from using cards like Evenly Matched and Lava Golem. So it's just a really good option right now, and people hate that. I don't blame them. It feels really toxic when it's pulled off well. But you got to prepare for it. You got to make an extra deck that prepares for it. If you're not playing cards that can deal with it. I've already talked about Ash. Ash is good. It's here because of Branded's relevance and its ability to stop Book of Eclipse. Good old Shifter. You know why it's there. I mean, it's just if it's a deck that it hurts, you're sending in all three into your main deck, and you're just gonna turn the deck off. So, you gotta watch out for this card. If you're playing against Kashtira, it's gonna come up. I guarantee it. And be prepared to deal with that somehow. Besides the other cards that I wanted to get into that are worth talking about, Change of Heart is another thrust target, of course. It's just a good card in general. They have to respond somehow, otherwise they're going to just lose the duel. And that's why Big Eye has such a big impact. So being able to just Big Eye anyhow, straight up, it's really good. The next card I'm talking about is the Pointer of the Red Lotus. This card has been hit to 1. It's extremely good. We all know that. How did it get better? Well, if you banish a card from your opponent's hand, you can then attach it under your Arise Heart so they don't get it back at the end phase. Pretty good. So if you're not playing this already, you probably will now, because that's just busted. If your opponent's playing a hand trap, you can go ahead and set it with your thrust on your first turn, and you're looking like you're going to take their best card from their hand, they won't be able to use it. So yeah, that's very good. As far as playing around it, I mean, if you're playing hand traps, it's more likely they'll thrust into it. If you're not, just pray. Next card is Dimensional Barrier. Yeah, I mean, it's very good. It stops the Kashtira from getting into their Exceeds. We all know how good Kashtira are just as bodies on the field without the Exceeds. So it doesn't quite accomplish the full goal that you need it to as far as dealing with these guys. But it is good. It is being seen because of Branded as well. And it's still a good thrust target going first if you happen to, you know, have your opponent activate a monster effect. So, still going to be seen. Branded, I'm sorry, look out for it. I can't help you there. It exists. Next card, Solemn Judgment, like I talked about. If you're going first, you probably want to play Solemn Judgment as a Kashtira player because you don't have negations. You just don't. So it's either you set yourself up to not get nibbed, not get thrusted in Dark Hold and all that good stuff. Solemn Judgment's just one extra layer of insurance that you have to just stop the worst case scenario from happening. It's just a good card. Obviously, Yu-Gi-Oh! We go into time, not looking so hot when you burn 4k life points, but still a good option. Next card is Lancia, Artifact Lancia. This is gonna, again, kind of like the Dimensional Barrier. It's gonna limit your opponent's ability to go off. It's likely they'll still have some cards present on the board, but it does slow them down or pretty much stop them for the most part. So it's a good option, but again, like I've said, I mean, do you want to play this card over some of the other options where you're not going to get thrusted upon, shafted by the thrust? So, you got to decide for yourself if that's something that is the best option for you. Next card is the Divine Carnet. It's kind of the same spot as Thrust when you think about it, just because of the fact that you need them to activate their effects. That's not hard to do if they're happy-go-lucky in the standby phase and they're activating this, and then you activate any card and it gets banished and he activates his card. Then it's fantastic. It's very obvious how fantastic this card can be. Problem is, do you have, the adequate zones still to do this? Because you got to have an open zone in order to special summon the card, right? And did they activate their effects? Is this card sitting in your hand now and you're punching the air? So it's kind of hard to decipher if this is the best option versus, like, say, Lava Golem. But it can be extremely good. It can turn the tide of the match as a one card. It's always good to have a card, just one card of your 5 or 6 that can just change the whole game up. This card can do that, but I do fear for its relevance due to the fact that, again, the people who had success in Kashtira were pretty much Summon Arise Heart Protect. That being said, it's likely he's going to utilize his effect, Arise Heart, during the turn, so at the worst, you will be able to get rid of it and get this out at, potentially 3k. So it's a good option. It will either fall off completely in relevance or it will go up in relevance. So we'll see. But consider grabbing one if it interests you. That pretty much wraps it up. You can see there's a ton of options that have come up, and this is generally what ends up shaping the rest of the format for a meta deck such as Kashtira. But one thing I did want to point out, I mean, we're looking at about, 26 cards here in this general main deck, 3 of them being Prosperity to get into other cards. This deck is extremely good at functioning with a ton of space available to you. So really, if I go ahead and knock these guys out, this is how much space you have to potentially play like triple Nibiru, triple Ash, triple Shifter, triple Imperm, enemy controllers, lances, Book of Moons, thrusts, tactics. I mean, you've got a ton of room in this deck. This deck is very adaptable. You want to play the adventure package, play the adventure package. Something I should have mentioned in the beginning. It's good. It's good going second. Puts a negate up on the field. So this deck is really ready for the format. It's ready to adapt as much as it needs to. So keep your eye on these cards. Decide what's best for you. What's best against Kashtira. How do you defend against these cards? And catch you guys in the next one. Peace.